Hey everyone, I'm JD Fiscus, former Accenture and currently working in the healthcare space where I specialize as director in AI labs, operations, and governance. Today, what we're going to look at is AI Studio, which is a tool that you can use for vibe coding. And in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to see how we can create or freshen up an old website design or even look at our current design and create something that we could present to leadership or to investors so that we can leverage a way to strategically hand this off to a development team. And so with that, let's go beyond vibe coding and let's go ahead and get started.
All right, so let's say that we have a scenario where we need to put together a demo for a senior leadership team member, or potentially we're even putting together a clickable demo for a investor. So what we want to do is we actually want to take something that we either already have or we're going to start from scratch. And basically we want to create it in a way that we can give a shareable product for someone to feel a connection with that particular system. And so the way I'm going to kind of show this is basically like I have gotten a landing page. The landing page has been super up to date, super fresh, super clean. We've got all different kinds of micro animations and integrations, interactions, different kinds of things that are kind of making this pop that is much more of a modern feel. But then we have our previous version. And so basically what we want to do is we want to see how we can kind of pitch an uplift of a design. And so how can we actually take what we currently have and retrofit it and use it as a pitch deck so that we can either try and get these features in the product roadmap, or we can use this again as a shareable piece of demo so that we can use it for investors. And so what I want to show is there's this new tool called Google AI Studio. And if you've done vibe coding before with like V0 or Lovable, what's really interesting about this is just the results that we're getting back from us at very early stages. So what we're going to do today is kind of take this and actually go from this to this in real time, start going through how some of the simple techniques that we can do. What is vibe coding and how can we actually leverage it to either be a senior leader and do this pretty quickly, or at least present to a senior leadership team in how we're going to put this into practice. So what is vibe coding for a senior leadership team? It's basically the idea of how can we actually build something in rapid delivery, but also be cognizant of the fact that we want to make something that we can hand off to developers and that they can take and run with it. So a lot of what I see with vibe coding is basically, oh, go clone this entire application or go build out this entire thing. And that's not really what vibe coding is to me. So vibe coding and AI assisted development are two totally separate things. When we think of what vibe coding is vibe coding is really our flow of creativity. It's very similar to like if we were putting like sticky notes on a board and kind of clustering our ideas together, testing things out, throwing away what doesn't work. And the reason that we can do this is because there's such a reduction in time for clarity. So what we can do is we can actually take our ideas, mold them, and put them into different tests and techniques and kind of vet out the solution that we actually want to build without pulling in design and development from the very beginning. So now I'm going to go about this in a more of like developer-centric programmatic way, but at the same time, if you don't have like those design kind of skills or even development skills, we're going to kind of keep the prompts fairly simple so that it can be almost where anybody can kind of come in and make something really interesting just by like some simple changes in words. The other thing that's really great about vibe coding is that it's faster POC validation, right? So we have the ability to show strategic value by putting something in somebody's hand to basically validate the feasibility before committing to our resources that are very time consuming and expensive, right? As a developer, I know the cost of programming on something for 80 hours and then all of a sudden we pivot and because of a direction of market or a direction with what's trending at the time. And so we really want to have a very solid use case before we start bringing in the final stages of development where the developers can actually use AI assisted tools. So the other thing is that's fast and cheap, right? So the ability, again, to kind of think about those sticky notes of putting things on the wall and being able to kind of suss out what we're trying to do um, is really important. The other thing is like showing by doing, right? So if we replace these theoretical kind of discussions of pie in the sky and things like that with a workable, clickable prototype, it allows us the ability to get our point across in a very clear way that can be executed on. Now, the thing that we can't do is we can't actually assume that once something is vibe coded, it should go into production. That's not the case. It is literally to convey an idea or concept that can be validated and then pursued and structured through traditional development with the addition of AI assisted tools. So when we look at what vibe coding actually means, we want to think about things like risk mitigation. So how do we validate assumptions before we actually pull in engineering? And on the flip side, like when we commit to these longer solutions, what do we want to kind of eliminate from the beginning so that we can actually maintain our security and privacy throughout this build? The other thing is we want capital efficiency, so we want to be able to determine what are things that are no-goes as quick as possible so that we can basically address that early on and then continue to pivot. And then the last thing is really important is shareholder alignment. If somebody can touch this and feel this and kind of get exposed to this and be able to change things themselves or convey a new concept by either copying this or actually building it out in their own way, in their own words, then human language just became the new programming language. And so this is why there's a big difference in vibe coding, again, between that and AI assisted development. And it's even different in how we build enterprise, right? So when we think about how we do enterprise, we have a very long ideation, we have some refinement, and then we have validation. And you can see that even in vibe coding, we are basically trying to address 1 and 2. We want to take down the time for ideation and refinement and basically use these LLMs to kind of convey concepts. And when we get to validation and deployment, what's happening here is we need to actually go through our traditional quality checks and follow a real development lifecycle. And again, with deployment, we need things to be scalable. We want to make sure that we're following continuous development or continuous integration, continuous development, CI/CD, right? And put that into production. And so what's really important to understand is that when we look at like the enterprise methodology, unlike vibe coding, you have to have a human in the loop or a human gate, a validation gate at phase 3 before you go into production. This is also where you're going to be doing AI assisted development. So what are we going to be doing today? We're basically going to be following that similar flow, but we're going to be doing a POC in AI Studio. We're basically going to prompt this implementation. It's going to give us some code. We're going to use Gemini 3. We're going to basically add some context. We're going to look at how we can export this code. We're basically going to have a review, basically our export. We're going to make this as a shareable thing that we can actually give to somebody else. And even if when we do deploy, we're not deploying to production at scale. We're simply just deploying. So again, that we can have this human in the loop. When we start talking about production at scale, that is going to be much more of like a traditional development cycle. Okay, so enough talking. We know that we're going to go from AI Studio. We're going to look and be able to see our code. We're going to have a human in the loop where we present our findings to senior leadership directly, or we give them a handoff that we can actually just a workable demo that is not connected to a database whatsoever. We're literally just going to give something that they can connect with in that feeling.
Real quick, if you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, check out the Vibe Coding Retreat, where we do on-site training and as well as an online community. With that, let's get back to it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to aistudio.google.com and basically look at a project. So the simplest way is to go ahead and start this project. You can just type in your idea here. Make sure that you're using a Gemini Pro preview. You can even do things like I'm feeling lucky, or there's different types of applications. Now, what's also really interesting about AI Studio is that out of the box, it comes with AI applications that you can pull in. So you can build an banana powered app. You can use Google search data. They have animated animated images with VO, conversational apps, all different kinds of things that you can do right out of the box. So I would definitely suggest going and playing around with this. And you don't even necessarily need to tell it to go do those things. It will just start doing them. And so one of the things that we're going to look at is how we can go to just very simply getting started. So again, I'm not going to teach like some crazy prompt management. What we're going to do, or prompt engineering or context management, we're going to talk about like very subtle things that anyone can do to try and convey an idea or concept. Again, this is more about vibing than it is about writing structured prompts in order to do AI assisted development. So when I try and do this, basically I'm just trying to give it a consensus of what I'm trying to change. So there's 3 different images that I'm going to provide. I'm going to provide the styling and look and feel of the new product that we're going to, the current state, and then the any kind of images that can kind of like supplement that. Right? So where are we trying to go, and maybe what is like the first dashboard page? So what we're going to do is we're basically going to say, okay, I want you to wildly update the app. The first image is going to show you for styling. We want to use Vite, TanStack, and React. So this is me telling the system that I want this to stay in the front end and front end only for now. Bring every page after into the 21st century, modern, clean, soft gradients. So when you start saying things like soft gradients or subtle gradient changes or shadows, softer matte colors, those kinds of things are the things that are actually going to make this image pop. And you can kind of let the LLM do the LLM's thing. Now, some other important things that I really like to add is it's important to do micro animations and micro interactions. An example of that is very soft, like highlighting. You can kind of see that this is a gradient. If I come down here, you can kind of see that the image in this hover is getting slightly bigger. Those are different types of micro animations and micro interactions that allow this thing to kind of pop. Again, you're making just subtle changes that will kind of stand out from a traditional kind of click and feel application without a lot of effort. The other thing is I'm just telling you where we're going to start. So we're going to start with the login page, and then we are going to move on to the dashboard and landing page. And if you notice, I don't have the Outlook or Google login here, but I was able to give it that instruction. You can see that it has like these separators, and it just came up with all this on its own. The most important thing, though, is that I also told it to use mock data and login functionality. Everything should be clickable. I'm not telling it to go to the database. I'm not telling it to start interacting with the database, because I want to do that after the fact. And with this case, especially since I already have an application that is being built with an API, I already know what those types and those data schemas are going to be. So I can actually leverage that and that information to make my app better. Right now, we're just going through and vibing and seeing what we can come up with. And you also notice that I didn't tell it to recreate the application, and I'm going to kind of show why we aren't going to do that. And so in this first iteration, what it did is it kind of set the scaffolding for things. It did our metadata, it came up with our types. It's where our types live is going to be also where our data kind of lives, and it gave us some structural components that we can use to get started. You can see that it already went through and basically found some errors. And now, based on those errors, I am going to expand upon it, right? So I have a dashboard that we can actually log into now where it's actually pulling back information, right? And so based on this information, we can have a sidebar that is collapsible, which is what we're telling it to do now. And we have a bunch of different instructions. So if you put things in a bullet point format, it kind of treats it like a to-do. So that way you can actually build out different fragments of the system. But if you notice, what I did in the second time is I overloaded the system. I gave it over almost 10 different images of the internal application that we have here, and I told it to rebuild it, right? And so that is a problem. That is something that is going to make it structurally unsatisfying. So I went ahead and I logged in, and we can actually kind of see, all right, this is what the original is, and I took a bunch of screenshots of this page to try and give it some contextual understanding of what's actually going on in the app. If we look back, we can actually see that it's pulling in the mock data, but it doesn't allow me to click any of these buttons, right? And so what I'm trying to do is I'm actually having it build out when I say CRUD, that is the create, read, update, delete. So the ability to actually come in here and edit. So now I can actually take screenshots of these individual pieces and actually go through and start creating a clickable demo. So if I actually take it one step at a time, where it came back with all of this information, if I now click, I'm starting to get these same interactions. Or if I have leads, what it's doing is it's kind of creating, based on this CRUD, that I have the ability to look at this information. But it's all going to be the same, right? So it's just giving me a table view so that I have something that I can actually click and start mimicking. So if we really want to change what this looks like, a really good example, and we'll show on how to do a image, is if you take a screenshot. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the products, and we're just going to go ahead and take a screenshot. On the Mac, it is Control Shift Option, and then we're going to select. I'm not going to get the whole thing because I have this. Actually, we'll just go ahead and get rid of that. And let's do Command Shift P again, and we're going to say our products page is going to look like this. And all we need to do is go in here and paste with Control V or Command V on the Mac, and you can say as simple as on the products page, recreate this view with the updated styling of overall app. We can also say things like make it unique from cell sheets. And so now I pasted it in there again, but we're actually going to go back, and when we actually click, we'll also give the edit, and we can copy and paste this in. And now we can actually create a clickable. What we're going to do is we'll also say update the modal to have a simplified user flow. And we could say things like maybe address like the selections or something. So we can take this information and we can say like update, we'll say make it easier to search. We can even tell it to use Gemini and use AI, right? And so now it's actually going to give us a different type of tool. So the other things that you can do while this is kind of loading is you can actually annotate on this application. You can also speak. So sometimes it's actually easier to just have a conversation with the AI and start talking to the app as it's actually going and building this information. The annotator is pretty interesting because it basically gives you a tooltip, right? And so you can select things like here and give a comment or a text box or maybe some erase. So if we wanted to get rid of like this collapse and have it be a button instead and do like a side carrot or whatever. And then you can just add to chat. And so while we're editing, it's still just getting ready. And so we can actually have this be set up for us to start using. We can even send it directly as this is waiting, or we can wait until this is done, and then we can actually send it again and get more feedback. So this is the way that you can actually go through and annotate your system so that like you can actually just mock it up. So I'm going to wait for this to finish and then we'll pick this back up. Okay, so now this is completed. It found an error on its own. And what we can do is we can actually go ahead and click to log back in again, and we're going to see what it came up with. So now we have a different view of the products. And it looks like we have a little bit of a bug because we can't actually scroll. So what we'll do is we'll use the annotation to basically say that we can't scroll. So the other thing is, let's see how this, great. So if we say annotate and we'll say this is frozen. The rest scrolls. Both. The rest scrolls or horizontally. We'll go ahead and did that add? Let's try adding a comment. This is frozen. Rest scrolls horizontally. You see where like this would, oh, it's actually already there. My bad. So the you can see though that like this is where, you know, having speech would be great. So we're gonna go ahead and add a chat. We'll then go ahead and send this, and we'll let this cook for a little bit longer. But while this is actually going through, let's talk about the next piece of how we actually get this in front of senior leadership or investor group, and we can get buy-in around our application. So we already know that we can annotate on top of this. And so what we can do is we can actually give this information and share it with someone by either downloading it, connecting it to GitHub, which we're going to talk about a little later, deploying it, or we can actually use this share button right here. This will allow you to basically share this application with more and more people so that they get what looks like is a Google Drive file, and what it'll do is it'll actually open this view and allow people to interact with it. So based on your permissions, the other members of the SLT team could actually come in here and actually make edits. That's super important. So now it's a collaborative tool where you can use things that aren't required by prompt engineering. Secondly, if you want to deploy this out, so there's two different ways you can do this. You can actually create a new project, and this will allow you to basically say, like, you want to go ahead and deploy this project, and we'll just say modern site feature. And we can go ahead and create, and it'll actually make the project for us. So even though sometimes it'll say set up billing, I'm going to avoid this. Sometimes when you are actually going into your application, it won't deploy regular on the ready. So what happens is you actually have to go back into and just redeploy your app, and then it'll work. So we also saw that we made this sticky part, so we're just going to go in and check this. Again, we don't have, and now you can kind of see we're able to actually scroll through our application and our product right here. So it's a little small. The other thing that you can do is let's say that you don't want to go through and deploy this on GCP. So what you can actually do is if you connect all of this to GitHub, that will allow you to sync everything that you have here, and then you can just deploy it through your normal processes. So for instance, if you already build on Vercel because you're using V0, we can actually deploy this out. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to save this. We're going to say modern site, and we're going to keep it private, and then we'll just say new site. And we can go ahead and create the GitHub repo. What it's doing right now is it's actually syncing to my GitHub, and then what it's going to do is it gives me the ability to actually go through Vercel. So I'm going to let this run up, and we're actually already done. So it's defining all the files that we need. We're going to go ahead and commit all of these changes. And now we can see that we are right here. We are synced. What I have noticed is that if you make changes locally, it does not sync back into this project. So it's right now it is a one-way sync. This is very new, so I imagine they'll give us the opportunity to do bidirectional sync. But if you want to then deploy this to Vercel through like your traditional hosting, all you need to do is come here and go to Vercel. And what you can do is do a new project. You look for your modern site. Now this is really interesting because what has happened is Vercel now allows you to deploy different types of hosting. So this is super important and super relevant to like what we're talking about, where we can now post a Vite application that is outside of what V0 and Next.js is, and actually build this on a traditional stack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I don't need to change anything here, and we're just going to go ahead and deploy. And while this is getting ready to deploy, I'm going to go ahead and pause. All right, so this is now finished deploying, and you can tell that it's already deployed and it is actually live because it's giving us a preview of what the site looks like. It means everything is built and it is gone through and is ready for us to test. So now let's just go look at what we've got. And basically we now have our Vercel application. We can actually come in here and go ahead and click sign in. We've got all of our modern implementation. We can come in here and even test if we want, if we want to see this in mobile view. We can come over here and see and realize, okay, this is something that we need to build in our Google application. We want to make sure that this has a mobile view. So if we come back, we can actually still push all of this out, and we can say make this app responsive for mobile. Now, this is probably going to be a lot for this to actually go and do, but the idea being that we can actually make this run and push this back out and do our changes. So we're going to go ahead and keep testing on Vercel while this is running, and go ahead and get out of the mobile view and look at the different pages that we went through. So we know that we have our different CRUD pages. Again, we have the ability to click around. So if we wanted to expand on any of these pages, we now could through the same process that we were talking about. We literally just need to have a conversation with it in order to start building out these different pieces of functionality. All right, so we let that finish, and basically what we're going to be doing now is we just want to see what it came up with. So we're going to look at the mobile. I haven't actually seen this. We're going to do this live. So basically what happened is it identified all the files that we have. So if you pay attention, we've got dashboard, product, settings, CRUD page. So this is a generic page that it's kind of reusing because we told it reuse components. We have some different components that are being more specified because we actually supplied images of what that feature's capabilities were. It went through, it did everything, and now we're going to actually see the fruits of its labor. And if we side scroll, that won't give us enough. We're going to have to try and go to full screen. Let's see if this will help us get our device. And there we have it. Now we have a mobile version of this application that we did with one prompt, right? And so again, this isn't necessarily meant to be like, oh, well, this is the entire application and we're handing this off. We can now give this to our senior leadership and say, here, take this with you on your phone. Start thumbing through it. Start playing with it on your own. What are the things that feel right? What are the things that don't? And it saved us a ton of time in our presentation. At the same point, we can actually take that, and now we can go ahead and if we save to GitHub, we can actually save these changes. And what that's going to do, as soon as it's done processing, it'll actually come over here to Vercel, and our deployments are going to kick off. So now our Vercel application is already going to have these updates in about 20 seconds, right? If we look at the other build time, then we'll be able to come back to our Vercel app and actually look at the changes again. So now this is our live version. We can right click, inspect, and we are gonna see the new version here. This is our mobile application, freshly deployed from AI Studio directly to Vercel in order to put it in the hands of senior leadership.